Partial knowledge of a thing is gained by looking at and learning about that thing, that object, that situation, or person. That's partial knowledge. But complete knowledge and total perception, as well as intuitive knowing and psychometric knowing on a timeline, is gained by being a thing. Not just looking, but being a thing. Not just learning about it, but being a thing, object, situation, or person. Through mainstream schooling, which at its core is anti-human potential, children have been trained to learn things through the acquisition of information, through looking rather than being, through looking at rather than looking as. But prior to that, children naturally knew how to identify with the thing they wished to learn about, and they learned about it much more quickly than via the information route taught in school. The fact that we no longer learn or perceive this way is one of the reasons most humans are cut off from their full potential, their full knowing, and who they really are. So the intuitive person, the telepathic person, the empath, knows a thing not by looking over a distance, but by becoming the thing. And once you fully grasp what I'm saying here, you can learn about anything, anywhere, and anyone fairly quickly. You can then later verify what you learned intuitively with more tangible evidence, but the intuitive sense of what something is comes to you instantly once you identify with the thing, with the place, or with the person. And the exercises in this recording will teach you how to do that. Everyone is born with this ability, but it's kind of trained out of us through schooling, through very unfortunate schooling. So once you try to regain it, it may take a few hours of practice before it returns. It may take several sessions going about a month or more. And initially, it'll be your imagination that is working, but soon that imagination will turn back into actual perception. So don't worry about it starting as imagining, as imagination, because soon that will turn back into perception. And I say back because you used to have this ability. So when I ask you to be that plant over there, be that plant, then you initially imagine being that plant. You might imagine its shape, texture, color, weight, size, its atmosphere, as your shape, texture, color, weight, size, and atmosphere. But as you get better at this, you leave your own imagination aside and simply put your attention, put your consciousness there, go inside it, merge with it, and be it. If I ask you to be your mother, to feel your mother's body, hands, and feet as your body, hands and feet, looking from her eyes, etc., that might start as imagining, but eventually it'll become a feeling. And soon already, imagination and feeling will mix, feeling being the actual state of your mother, and imagining being your projection of what her state is. So identifying with a person or thing is instant and easy, and if you put too much effort into all this, it reveals that you're not doing it correctly. For beginners, I might say, imagine what it feels like to be that, but as they become more advanced, I simply say, be that, and be that, and be that. The idea here is to simply shift consciousness into being it, into being the plant, being your mother, being your father, being a tree, being an apple, being a room, being a house, being a city, being a planet, being a dimension, being a pet, etc., with no distortion or projection from your imagination or your thoughts, and no interference from your personality. So, for example, if you strongly resist being a certain thing, it's actually your character, your personality interfering in the exercise. And we want to be able to project our essence, which is who we really are, beyond our earthly personality, into just about anything for the purpose of learning about it and understanding what it really is. You'll notice that in mainstream contemporary schooling, everything is labeled as this, and that, and categorized. And it's often mislabeled, not always, but it's often labeled as something other than it is. And the more symbols and labels are replacing intuitive knowing, direct perception, the further away a human being gets from reality, until almost everything they know is false. For example, most of the listeners here, and most people in general, believe that we went to the moon in 1969. And they'll tell you that if you doubt that fact, that means you're really a negative person or even a paranoid schizophrenic. But if you were intuitive, if you had the ability to project your consciousness into the so-called moon landing, you'd know we never went to the moon. And I'm using this controversial example, of course, to trigger you to learn more about your intuition, about reality, about getting in touch with reality. Because if you think NASA went to the moon, you're the delusional one, not me, even though most people would call me the delusional person. You know, when the sun shines on people and objects, the shadows go in only one direction. But if you look at photos from the Apollo moon landings, you see shadow going in many different directions. Do you know what that means? That means that rather than the sun, we're talking about floodlights being used the way you'd use them in a studio. Now, I don't want to get too much into this, but I gave you this example so that you know that what you intuitively perceive, you can later intellectually verify. Now, I just intellectually verified what I already knew intuitively before I even saw the evidence. So before I saw shadows coming from different sides on the Apollo moon landing photos, I already knew there's something fishy about it. I didn't even need the evidence, but it's good to have the evidence for later verification. And people who care neither about their intuitive knowing nor about evidence are actually mentally ill. And they go around calling people who are intuitive and who just know things mentally ill. So the situation is really reversed. But to see whether somebody is actually mentally ill or not, see how much success they're having in life. In other words, are they financially well off? Are they healthy? Are they having a good time? So rather than labeling intuitive people mentally ill or paranoid schizophrenics, judge them by the success they're having in life. And this really touches on why people are hesitant to practice what I'm teaching here and to activate true perception, true knowing, true intuition, is because as your awareness and perception increase, you learn a lot of things you'd rather not see, rather not know, rather not be aware of. Because the truth of the matter here on planet Earth is not always the prettiest. If we're going to learn true knowing, as we're doing in this presentation, then that'll include a complete knowing of things, both the good sides and the bad sides. Now let's start with some exercising, because I say you need several weeks of this kind of exercising to start regaining real perception. And that's pretty good. You've had a decade or more of mainstream schooling, and it can all be undone in just a few weeks. And it should be undone. So make yourself comfortable, sit back, put your attention on an object in your surroundings. And as best you can, be the object. Feel its texture as your texture, its shape as your shape. Its color as your color. Imagine seeing and looking from the perspective of that object. Feel the way the object feels as best you can. See the world from its eyes. And now go back to being yourself, feeling yourself, your body, your space, and feel the difference. That's what I'm looking for here. Feel the difference. And then can you imagine what it's like to be your father? Feel your father's feet as your feet, your father's hands as your hands, looking down at your hands and feet now in your imagination. Feel like your father. Feel like you had his face and you were looking out of his eyes. Now, if your father is no longer around, then identify with a past version of his. I'm not asking you to go into the afterlife here, at least not yet. as best you can, be your Father as you know Him. And then go back to yourself, be yourself again, and feel the difference. Back to your body, your space, your atmosphere. You are an atmosphere. And then be your Father again and feel the difference. How does your Father feel? How does it feel to be Him? There are different types of ideas and feelings, tensions, emotions that create the lines on His face. And then go back to being yourself. Feel what it's like to be you. And then choose another object in your surroundings and be that object. I mean, I could say imagine being that object, but you get the idea. You're not a beginner. Be that object fully. So project your consciousness out there and be the object. Did you know that you can actually remote view a location by identifying with something there? As if that tree or object or whatever's at that location had eyes, were a camera. And did you know that becoming a thing lets you know everything about it? I repeat that again. So important. And then be yourself again. Now, don't take this exercise lightly, because you're actually being inside the things that you're identifying with. You don't want to spend too much time in other things, lest you start synchronizing with them. If you stayed in your Father, for example, for more than 3 minutes, you start taking on a similar mood, a similar vibration, and it's not necessarily something you want to do. There's a reason you are who you are, and you've chosen to be who you've chosen to be. Now, I recommend you take this and you do it with plenty of inanimate objects, with all kinds of pieces of furniture in your house, with dishes, with cars, with the car's tires separately, with trees, with leaves, with birds, with pets, with rocks, and animate objects such as birds, trees, animals, insects, and so forth. And I also recommend you do it with different people, as well as your ideas of people. There's a difference between the people and your ideas. So you'd identify with your idea of a person, and then with a person, and then back with yourself. And the reason you keep alternating and going back to yourself is so that you can feel the difference. frequency matching is all about feeling the difference. So, as you become more practiced and more skilled in this, you want to speed it up and be able to quickly become a thing, identify with a thing, and quickly go out of a thing. All this is to be done without analysis. The mind is not involved. This is a soul and intuitive skill. So there's no need to analyze what something may be or who something may be. Just go in and out and in and out. And then once you're good at this, you can actually choose something you prefer to experience and not just randomly go into people and objects to feel, but choose something that you prefer to experience and become that. See from its eyes, experience from that thing already being true. That's actually reality creation and manifestation. Because if you can occupy a certain identity or thing for some time, you become it. It becomes you. In fact, I always recommend ending this exercise by identifying with someone or something with an idea that you'd prefer to be, with the higher version of you, the next higher version of you. And that is what frequency matching is all about. But it's really up to you to practice it. And if you don't, there's a subconscious knowing that it will increase your perception, and many people just don't want their perception increased because what they already perceive is more than enough. If you're looking for more exercises along these lines, check out my audio course on remote sensing on my website.